Okay.
All right, and we're on.
Okay.
How you going?
Hi.
So, I guess, for those of the people that are listening, obviously, Francesca is actually one of my wife's friends. I think you guys met when you were away in Taiwan studying abroad.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And funnily enough, like when I was thinking back on it, so it was Angela and I's 7-year wedding anniversary yesterday.
Oh,
And so
congratulations. Happy
that would
anniversary.
probably have that's probably the last time we've seen you. I'm
Yeah, it
thinking.
is
I'm
the
trying.
last time I saw you.
Yeah. So it's like 7 years ago. So obviously, you've had a lot going on in your life since then, and we've obviously, had quite a bit going on over in our lives.
Yeah.
But I guess, part of this chat is to obviously I want to sort of bring it all back. And I guess, let's start with, I guess, what was your first memory
First memory, like in my
growing up?
entire life.
Yeah. So like when
Okay.
you think, so I guess the story I normally tell is one of my first memories is that I almost died putting a hose in my mouth after throwing, like I was probably like 3 or something, and my brother and I were playing in the backyard,
Oh
and I
gosh.
put the hose in my mouth, and he turned the water tap on, and it was a really long hose,
Uh-huh.
and then when the water came on, I like drowned, and then they had to take me to hospital.
Oh my gosh.
So that I don't remember the drowning part. I remember putting the hose in my mouth.
Oh my gosh.
But that's one of my first memories. So I guess obviously you're in Taiwan at the moment, but you grew up in the States.
I grew up, in California, in the States.
In California.
Yeah.
Yep. So, like, when you think back on your childhood, what would be the first thing that you think you can remember?
I have like a vivid memory of, actually, like they're two different memories, but both times I was moving, like my family was moving into a new house. And
Hmm.
so it was either, I guess the earlier one was just like my parents like doing a walkthrough of this empty house and just saying, okay, this is our new house.
Oh
So,
wow! So
yeah.
you can actually you remember that, like, do you remember the house that you're in before that?
I do. I remember the house. Oh, do I
Okay.
remember? I guess it's hard, right? I remember it from pictures, right? Like we have so many pictures and videos that I can say like, oh yeah, I remember that. But I remember. I guess maybe I remember more of it was a new house, like the second house we moved to. Yeah,
Mm.
I can see that.
And what, I guess, when you think back on your emotions at that point, did that feel strange to you, or was that something that you just, you felt comfortable with, or?
Yeah, I guess I don't remember what the emotion was. It's funny because I've moved a lot, right? Like I live overseas now,
Yeah.
but I don't remember having any strong emotions. It was just kind of like, okay, this is change. And actually, that's actually very funny because my story and like my journey and probably what we're going to talk about later is
Yeah.
everything that I've done has always just been about change and
Mm.
adapting and yeah, so it's funny that that's my first memory.
Okay. And I guess, growing up, so for people that aren't, watching this, they obviously can't see what you look like, but your surname is Chang? Chang?
Chang. Chang.
Chang?
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's an Asian surname, obviously.
Yeah.
And you would look, I guess like what we'd call in Australia half caste. I don't know if you guys call it the same thing over in America. Do you guys have a term for
In California and Hawaii, we've borrowed the Hawaiian term for hapa. It's hapa. Is that
hapa?
hapa? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably what we call a halfie or a half caste,
Ah,
in
okay.
Australian slang or Aussie or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So your father's obviously Taiwanese.
Yes, yeah, my dad is from Taiwan.
Your dad's from Taiwan, and then what about
Mhm.
your mum?
My mother is fourth generation Italian American from Boston.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Or
and
actually,
so
no, I'm
Boston
sorry.
is
I'm fourth generation Italian American. She is third generation Italian American. Yeah, that's
okay,
right. Yeah,
and so Boston's obviously on the East Coast, yeah,
yeah,
and so you grew up on the West Coast, which
yeah.
is LA, right? Yep.
San
Do you know
Francisco. San
San
Francisco
Francisco?
area. Yeah.
Do you know how your mum ended up getting over there to the other side, or did she grow up in the other side?
No, so yeah, my mom grew up in Boston.
Yep.
My father and mother they met in Boston when my dad was going to college there. So they met in Boston, and then they
Yep.
eventually moved to the West Coast, California, because that's where my grandparents, my father's parents, were living. and so they
Okay.
wanted to move closer to them, or my dad wanted to move closer to them, and yeah, the rest of his family was actually in California. So
Okay. And so, I guess when you were growing up as a kid, what kind? How would you describe yourself as a kid?
I was actually, for a long time, I was actually very, very shy. I was kind of that kid that stood against the wall, right? If observed. But it wasn't until I started acting classes, like TV and film acting classes, where I kind of opened up and realized, like, I'm actually an extrovert. I'm not a shy introvert. I'm quite extroverted, and since then, that's just how my personality has been.
Okay. And so you've got siblings, right? You got a sister, I think.
I have one younger sister, yes.
Okay. So you're the older one.
Mhm.
I always think about this because I've got a brother who's 7 years older than me, right? And
Ah.
so when I was growing up, having a brother who was 7 years older, I was basically the 10-year-old who wanted to do 17-year-old things.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
so I think for me, I never really looked at the age thing, and I sort of see it in my kids where it's like with my son, who's there's about a 2 year gap between Harley and Cadence, who's the oldest one. But whatever she does, he wants to do. Um, did you have any of that sort of happening, with your sister relationship, or I guess how would you describe your relationship with your sister growing up?
Yeah, and exactly that. She was always trying to copy me.
Yep.
I allowed it though. I was okay with it. Yeah.
And then okay, so like from a schooling perspective, so what do you remember the school that you went to? Where did you go for your early schooling?
All around the Bay Area, California. I I went to kindergarten through fourth grade at one school, and then we moved, and I went to an entirely different school for fifth grade until I graduated high school.
Okay.
Two completely different environments.
Yeah. And do you find that you felt different as a result of that? Like it was, I guess the thing with moving people, like when you've moved schools or moved
Yeah.
places, sometimes it's hard to readjust to a new environment and establish friendships and that sort of stuff. Did you go through any of that?
Yeah, actually, it was very hard. I was only 9 years old, but coming from a very diverse school, underprivileged area, and going to a very wealthy monoracial school, where everybody is everyone there is white, which it didn't make a difference for me, obviously, because I look white, but it felt very different. Yeah, like the community was different. People's attitudes were different, and then yeah, school was just a lot more competitive in general, which was something that I wasn't quite used to yet.
Mm. And then, so I guess speaking about that, right? Like, the thing that I had a couple of white, like halfy friends growing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did that weigh on you at all? Like, because you sort of you can sort of fit in with the white people, and you sort of depending on I guess probably now you might associate more with the Asian side, but
Mm-hmm.
like was that a challenge for you growing up, like trying to balance that?
I think what do you call them, halfies? Is that what you call
Yeah,
them?
we call them halfies or half castes.
Half. I think every halfie goes through some kind of identity crisis at one point in their life, right? Because it's, for me, it's like I'm not Asian enough, but I'm not really white. Like I'm not white enough, but I'm different, right? I eat different kinds of foods, or there's different languages spoken in my house. So there is definitely that identity crisis. I think it was, again, because I walk around with like these white passing features, so externally it was okay, right? Like I was white privilege, right? I'm treated very well, but
Mm,
internally it was a struggle for me because I didn't know, where I belonged. I didn't know how to even say what my race was, right? Because there's no such thing as a, halfie is not like a race, right? It's like, I guess Eurasian is if you want to categorize it, you half European,
mm,
half Asian, but there's no category for people like me. Whereas if
mm,
you're monoracial, you can say, oh, I'm white, oh, I'm Asian. Um, but yeah, so there's definitely there was that identity crisis, and I don't know if it did it get worse when I moved. Maybe. I mean, when you're that young, I do remember like I don't remember really seeing race, right, at the time when you're just like a kid and it's not, it's a social construct, so you don't really realize it. But when I was a kid, I didn't see it. Maybe I felt it more than anything. So.
Mm. So just on that, like when I think back on my childhood and my early years in school, I never really understood the whole race thing either. And then
Mhm.
I think the day that there's a pivotal day that I can actually sort of say that was the moment I finally realized, hey, there is a race thing, because
Oh.
I was at school, and I was in the boys' toilet, and there was another guy, beside me, a young gentleman, kid named, I think his name was Jason, and I remember because he had like big ears and brown hair and freckles, and he was calling me, names like Chink or Chinaman or something like that, and so I ended up pushing him in the trough, like I pushed him in the urinal, and
Good for you.
and, and look, I don't condone my actions, but obviously, I didn't at the time. I don't think I really understood what he was, how he was trying to insult me.
Right.
I think it was more just, I picked up on, hey, there's some intimidation factor, so I ain't going to take this guy's shit, and I shoved him
Yeah.
and into the trough he went. But before that, I don't really think I realized that there was any such sort of difference between myself and the other people around me, which is quite odd considering that where I grew up in Sydney. So from a young age, where I lived with my parents is a suburb called St Clair, which is west of Sydney, and most people would probably associate it with like being like a bogan area, which is our sort of Aussie slang for redneck.
Ah.
So it was like that kind of an area. And I guess that's probably why, when I speak the way that I speak. I sound bogan. But, for me, I never really picked up on that until probably, that would have been about year one. So I would have probably been around maybe 6 or 7 at that time.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But for you, I guess, when did you start to sort of have those sorts of feelings? Do you remember what age it might have been around?
Feelings. Maybe as I got into middle school,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because middle school is also the time where like the cliques start, right? And so there's a much stronger, I don't know, sense of people trying to base their identities on who they hang out with, right? Or
Yeah.
who they hang out with, what's cool, what's not. So maybe I guess during that time where, and then you start to, the content and education you start to get, it does get a little more historical, political, right? Whatever it is, and you
Mm-hmm.
start to talk about these things in class. So probably middle school.
Okay. And then speaking of schooling, what kind of a student would you describe yourself as? So were you the studious type? With the, what was your style, I guess?
Yeah, I was stereotypical, like good Asian student where, I mean, because my father was always like, A's. Hey, why did you get a B? A, like
Yeah.
very, very common. But what's funny is that, I not stereotypically, like I was not good at math. It was just something that I struggled with. It didn't click for me. And I mean, I can do it, right? I felt much stronger and much more comfortable in arts, liberal arts, reading, writing. I loved to write. And then it's always like something where I could express myself. I just gravitated
Yeah.
towards that.
And then just to sort of bring it back to the acting and drama classes. So I guess normally, so I would say that most Asian parents, and I know, obviously your mum's, Italian American, but most Asian parents, don't really like the artsy sort of stuff. And I guess, me speaking on that, like there was this one time, so my mum used to always send me to like extracurricular activities. And then this one year she sent me to some course, and I don't think she actually knew what she was sending me to, because I think the previous time I'd done like trigonometry as a kid, and then the next time I was doing a acting and drama and basically a clown school. Like I learned how to juggle and perform and
Wow.
do those sorts of
Okay.
things. And I don't really think she knew what she was sending me to. But so what age did you go into that acting and drama class that sort of made you realize that you're a bit of an extrovert? And I guess which of your parents was the influence for that?
Yeah. So I started TV and film acting when I was 7 years old. And it was not school related. It was a private. I actually like my mom would actually we would take public transportation for up to 45 minutes just to go into San Francisco to take these classes on the weekends. Um, yeah, that's a good question. Even though like my father, like my Taiwanese father, he has those stereotypical traits of like getting good grades and pushing yourself. He and my mother are actually both artists at heart. Like my father, when I said they met in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
My dad went to college for music. He's a musician.
Oh,
He
wow. Okay.
majored in the jazz saxophone. So when
Huh.
I was growing up, he was always playing music. And so I think they both, to answer your question, I think they both encouraged me to do the acting thing because they just, they were like, it's the arts. It's, like they should have this kind of extracurricular.
Okay.
So
Just
yeah.
now, and I want to digress for a second because Angela mentioned something about your dad, him
Uh-huh.
being like the top BMW salesperson in the Bay Area or something like that. And I
Yes.
want to talk about that just because conveniently, I'm running a BMW dealership in Australia at the moment, in Sydney at the
I
moment.
know that you're in car sales as well. Yeah. Yeah.
so so I guess what can you tell me about your dad as this sales guy?
Yeah, so what's interesting is, I mean, when he came to the States, he was, an immigrant. He did, have to work really hard to get where he got to, but the reason why he went to sales in the first place is because he was just so ambitious, and he kind of had this mindset of like, oh, like I want to determine my own salary. It was very, I mean, that's very driven, very ambitious, for him to say like, oh, I don't want to work, I don't want to work in an office. I want to make as much money as I can. So he went into
Mm.
sales for that reason. But again, artist at heart. So even though he's a salesman by day, he moonlights as a violinist even now. Like he still
Oh,
performs
wow.
in orchestras. He conducts sometimes. Yeah. So he does both.
But was that challenging in terms of, and why I say challenging, because I know that sales guys, they spend a lot of time at work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for you as his daughter growing up, did you find it challenging to get your share of his time?
No, I mean, he was such a good dad. Like, I mean, yes, we saw him less than my mom, of course, right? Because she was raising
Mm.
us full time. That was her full-time job, raising us. But I mean, he would come home late, like later than most dads, right? Because he doesn't have like you don't have the 9 to 5 office job, right?
Yeah,
So he'd
yeah,
come home late, but he would basically just drop everything and be like, okay, like dad's home, like we're gonna play music, whatever, and he
yeah,
would just stay up with us all night. So
yeah. Well, that's really nice.
yeah,
I resonate with that.
yeah, I bet you do.
So, um, okay, so talk to me a little bit more about your high school years.
Mhm.
So, you obviously then went on to study law, but I guess what I wanted to understand, when you were in high school, did you have any idea what it is that you wanted to do in life? Like,
In high school, not really. Like I don't think that, to be honest, I don't know about the Australian school system, but the American education system, I don't think really exposes us enough, right? And that was actually what led me to become a lawyer because I didn't know enough about the law, right? The only thing we know about lawyers is that they make a lot of money. It's a very prestigious job, and nobody questions people who go to law school, right? So in high school, no, I didn't really know what I wanted to be. I mean, I loved acting, and so for a while I thought, I would pursue that. I would pursue the performing arts.
mhm,
But then, yeah, by the time college came around, it's like, okay, you're pursuing a degree now, right? Acting is a hobby, and I know that's such an American attitude, which I've come to dislike, where it's arts is just like, oh, it's just a hobby, right? We don't invest in the arts, we don't put money into the arts. Where I
mhm.
think we should invest a little bit more, and make that a part of everybody's lives.
Yeah. Look, I absolutely agree with that. I think a lot of the schooling and education system is built around funneling people into a specific mindset.
Mhm.
And I can even think about when I started in the automotive industry as an apprentice, I had a conversation. So I was learning how to work on cars and service cars and things like that. And the owner of the business that employed me, he said to me, Johnny, when I was young, I could have become a pro golfer. Like he was that good at golf.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, he decided to pursue his career over golf. And I guess for him, it's worked out because now he owns, a few businesses, he makes lots of money, and he can play golf whenever he wants. But that was the lifestyle that he chose. And I think, the problem with when I reflect on that, and that I think is a problem about that, is that it's sort of saying that you have to pick, in life,
Yes,
you always have to,
totally.
you always have to sacrifice. And I think, to a certain degree, when you're at the tip of the spear, if you wanted to become a pro golfer, that would take sacrifice. But I think nowadays we also have access to a lot of other information, so that the pathways to get good at other things is actually a lot easier to do than what it was traditionally, right? Like, so if you wanted to learn an instrument, traditionally you'd have to find a music teacher and have a music teacher teach you the theory behind how to play these instruments and what are the scales and how do the chords work and all these sorts of things, and you build up on your skill set from that. Now, you can basically just go onto YouTube and watch a video. They've got those keyboards which light the keys up based on what you need to press, and people can develop these skills without necessarily going through that same pathway.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, and so I do hope that that's a sign that people will be able to integrate the arts into our lifestyles, right?
Yeah. So then, what made you choose law then? Was it just?
Yeah. So, okay. So high school, college. When I was in college, I was such an activist, right? I was so involved in just everything that I thought needed to change, or I really wanted to make a difference, right? Your college years is right the most romantic time of your life, where you do see the world as very idealistic, and which is good. Like, you want to make a lot of impact. So being so involved in everything, I was promoting same-sex marriage before that was even an item on the ballot, before people were talking about it, before you were seeing it on TV, right? It was such a hush-hush thing. So I was promoting same-sex marriage, working on human rights issues. Like, for example, the college I went to, they actually flew in survivors of the Rwandan genocide. And so, that experience, of course, has a very, very profound impact on you and what you want to do. So I thought that the way to, continue what I was doing and to continue having an impact was to go to law school in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I also, again, being the oldest and having just wearing a lot of responsibility in your family, there is also, and then maybe it's an Asian thing too, there is a desire to support your family too. So going into a lucrative career, that was something that motivated me too.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so how would you describe, so when you started, okay, I'm just trying to understand the timeline between going to college and then your time abroad, right? So how does that fit together?
Okay. So when I was in college, my junior year of college, when I met Angela, that's when I did a study abroad program for 3 months. And so that was my first time ever stepping foot on the island of Taiwan. It was my first time, studying Chinese in a natural environment. And interestingly, that was also my father's first time going back to Taiwan since he was 9 years old, because he left when he was very, very young.
Yeah.
So,
and can we delve into that story a little bit? So what was the reason behind him having to leave Taiwan at 9 years of age?
So during that time, Taiwan was under martial law. And so basically everybody's civil liberties were oppressed. My grandfather, he was actually blacklisted just because he wanted his religion, was suspicious, was what the government said, because it was related to, it was Japanese Buddhism essentially. But, because of Taiwan's history, the martial law, the ruling government, they had already kind of kicked the Japanese out. And so they were suspicious of anybody who had ties with, the former colonizer, I guess. So, my grandfather was blacklisted. And then my grandfather also didn't want his two sons to serve, in the military under that martial law. Things with China were very, very tense. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And so they left. They emigrated to Okinawa first, actually, and then to the United States.
Okay. Yeah. And then, so I guess for you traveling to Taiwan, so I'm guessing your dad went with you when you first went abroad?
Yeah, that was
Yep.
his first time being back.
Um, can you remember what the emotions were, on the plane? Like, did you talk to your dad about it? Like, did he share anything with you in terms of how he was feeling, and I guess obviously how you were feeling as well?
I was I was excited. I think I was just really nervous about the language barrier because at the time, my Chinese was Mandarin, sorry, was non-existent almost. Even though
Yeah,
I took a few classes before going. It's so different learning in the classroom, right, than learning it
yeah.
in a
When you're
natural
forced to.
environment. Yeah, so I think I was just excited to see it and to be there. My dad didn't he didn't say much, but I only discovered until much later that he actually struggled, using his language skills when we were there because he hadn't spoken Taiwanese, not Mandarin, like Taiwanese, right,
Yeah,
is what was
you
spoken
know, yeah,
before. Yeah, Minanhua before the KMT came. He hadn't spoken Taiwanese in so many years or hadn't really used it as an adult. And so he was struggling speaking to his family members, and then he also felt really awkward, like seeing family members that he hadn't seen in 40 years either. Yeah, right?
yeah,
Because it's just very Asian to like when you're in town, it's like, oh, let's have dinner, right? Let's share a meal and
yeah,
act like we're family. But for him, that was just very awkward.
yeah.
So
Well, you haven't had any interaction with those people for such a long time, right?
yeah, yeah.
And you would have obviously you would have been roped into that as well, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I went with him, but
Yeah.
because I didn't have the ability to communicate, then I didn't know what was going on.
Oh, you
So
flew under the radar.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so I guess what was part of your decision to want to go back and go abroad to Taiwan and study the language? Like, was there a specific reason for that for you?
Yeah, it was always curiosity, right? My father, of course, he was a little bit disconnected from his roots just because he left so early and it was, a
Mm.
different country back then. So when I was young, I would actually always ask him, like, oh, can you teach me, your language, right? Because I grew up hearing it all the time. He's still with his family members, right? Like they wouldn't use English to converse, right? They used Taiwanese, they used Mandarin, or they used even Japanese because they lived in Okinawa for a long time, and I have an
Mm.
aunt who's Japanese. So I just wanted to learn, um, the language, and for me that was kind of a, a way to also learn the culture, right? Because I didn't know that much about Taiwanese culture. I knew that we ate mooncake. I knew that we ate like, like youtiao, doujiang and stuff like that, but it was
Yeah.
so superficial for me. I didn't know anything else. So yeah, it started with, for me it was like, okay, how do I get back there? How do I discover my roots? And it just started with language. Like, well, let me learn the language and then I can go there.
Mm. Okay. And then, or I guess when you've gone abroad, and so at the start you would have had your father with you, and then at some point he would have obviously had to have gone back to America, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. What was your emotion like at that point where it's like, okay, you're by yourself now?
I felt I've always felt super safe in Taiwan, and I think Angela will probably say the same thing. I've just felt so safe. Like the people here are so friendly and helpful. I had when I landed here, I wasn't completely by myself. I had an uncle who I just met,
Okay.
but
Yep.
he was, and I couldn't communicate with him very well, but he was there to always just like he showed up every weekend to just check on me and or take me out to
Make sure
eat
you're
or
okay.
something, which very Taiwanese, right? To just check, are you okay? Like, do you need help? So I just felt very safe and protected the whole time I was here.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask a selfish question. When did you first meet Angela in Taiwan? And I guess what was your initial impressions?
Angela, yeah. So it was she lived on the same floor. So we lived in dormitories, right? Like during the
Yeah.
study abroad program, she lived on the same floor as me, just a couple doors down. And I thought she was the cool kid. I told her this already. I was like, oh, she's the cool kid. Like everybody's always hanging out in her room, or she's the cool Australian, because the majority of us were, Americans, right? And so that wasn't that cool. We all came from the same college system, but yeah, she was the cool Australian girl on our floor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
So she was the different one just because she was Aussie.
yeah, I mean, I guess there were only a handful of us of Aussies, right? Like I don't remember that many actually. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so how long did you end up spending in Taiwan that initial trip?
For the study abroad program, I was only there for 3 months.
Okay. And then how do you think your Mandarin went, after those 3 months? Did you find that you improved a significant amount, or was there still plenty for you to sort of go back to and try and improve?
So definitely improved to the point where I was able to carry a conversation with my uncle, right?
Yeah.
That was actually more helpful than the study abroad program, because what would happen is we would go to class for 3 hours, right? And then we'd get out of class and hang out with English speakers the rest of the day, the whole weekend, the whole night, right? Go clubbing, go karaokeing. And so you weren't really learning the language while you were living in the country. But yeah, so I was definitely able to converse with my uncle. I was able to, read and write text messages with him. But yeah, there was a lot more I needed to learn. And that ultimately, that's why I came back after I graduated college and in between law school, and lived here for 2 years, where Angela was here again too.
Yeah, she spent a lot of time abroad.
Yeah.
She's probably running away from me, but anyway. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to sort of touch on when it comes to, I guess wanted to touch on the law side of it. So, you've completed your law degree. You've obviously, you go on, I think you got, what do you guys call it? The bar over there as well?
The bar exam. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So you've done your bar exam. And then did you start practicing?
Yeah. We start practicing, actually before we even take the bar. Just as soon as we graduate, we try to work for a law firm. We're basically doing everything as a lawyer, just don't have the license and not getting the pay. Yeah. And
then when did the alarm bell sort of ring for you that, hey, maybe this isn't what you want to do?
Okay. So I actually had two separate mindset shifts that happened. The first one actually happened when I was still in law school. It was my second year of law school, and I, again, became very involved in my community, right? That's something that I just always do. I actually planned the largest legal conference for Asian American lawyers in the state of California. So I was doing that full time and going to law school full time, which, it sounds like it was a lot, but I just felt myself, again, gravitating towards the community organizing and loving every part about it. I was the event leader. I was managing law school students from 9 different schools in the States. I was fundraising, doing marketing. I was getting, judges to come speak. And so I realized, I like this so much more than what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So much more than the practice of the study of law. And that's when I realized, I would consider, a career related to this, whether that's business development, marketing, event planning, right? All of these skills that I'm learning and doing. So I started to, just realize that in my head, this is happening, maybe law is not, the only thing for me, or it's not the right thing for me. So that was the first shift. And then actually the second shift happened in a more negative way. While I was studying for the bar, I became extremely unhealthy. The doctors thought I had kidney stones because of the pains I was experiencing. Wow. So I had to go, while I was studying for the bar, I had to go to the doctor several times. I had to get x-rays. And they told me, nothing is physically wrong with you. It's just stress. Yeah. And so that was a wake-up call where I was like, what am I doing this for? This is not, I personally, I've never felt that a job was worth that. So. Yeah.
It's funny. So I studied law here in Australia as well. I never went through and obviously, did our version of the bar or whatever, because I was already working. So my circumstances were a little bit different. My mum was a little bit ill, so I started to go out and sort of fend for myself. And I was studying engineering, science, and law, and I was looking at, what are the sort of career opportunities from that? Because everybody sort of looks at that combination and they go, well, what are you going to do with that? And to me, there was only really sort of two industries that you could sort of do something with that. And one of them was obviously civil and construction. So like, that style of work. And then the other side of it was the automotive industry. And, when I reflect on it, civil and construction probably would have brought me more money, but cars are way cooler. So I ended up in cars. And so then, because I had already started working in the automotive industry, I got this opportunity. I did do some temping at one point, doing some like paralegal work and things like that, just to sort of dip my toe in the water. And then I got offered a temping role at a pretty top tier law firm in Australia. And when I first got offered the contract, I was like, oh yeah, I'll take it. But I was already working full time at this other job. Mm-hmm. And so my initial response was to take it because obviously it's a top tier law firm. You don't get these opportunities every day of the week. And then I started to think about it. And I started to think, okay, is that really the life that I want? And so originally my plan was I was going to take a couple of weeks annual leave to go and try it and see if I like that, and then potentially shift into that. And then for some reason, I sort of talked myself out of it. I spent a few days, I thought about it over the weekend, and I ended up having to call this recruiter back on the Monday. And I said to her, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to do it. And she's like, but you already accepted it on Friday. And I'm like, yeah, but I've changed my mind. And she's like, Johnny, you realize if you say no to me on this, because I've already accepted, I'm going to blacklist you. You got no chance of going back into it. And so I was like, well, yeah, like, so be it, right? And so then that was the end of my law career. Gone. Just like that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you regret that decision?
I don't, because I sort of look at it from the perspective of, and I'm keen to know what your reflections are on this, right? Because I think, when you're going through college or uni and you're studying law, you have this idea about, what is it going to be like, right? And I think people only think about, the highlights, right? Like if you're doing, if you're, I guess when most people think about law, they think about criminal cases and, that style of work. And the reality is much different. It's a lot of reading. It's, 50, 60-hour weeks of just reading. Yeah. Trying to find that, one thing to try and hinge your argument on and then building upon that, right? And so I think I sort of realized that quite early on, when you're doing all your case studies and things and pieces where, and look, I'm not the right guy to model when it comes to study. For me, my mantra was P's get degrees. So, I did do better in the law side than the engineering side, but my attendance rate was, through the floor. I didn't really put the effort that I should have put into it. But I think I sort of realized that, for me, the amalgamation of law and engineering is in the business field. And that's why I sort of gravitated towards the business side of things. And then I thought, that's probably a better use of my skills. And I think, now that I reflect on it, that probably shows in my own strengths and I guess the way that my career has gone. I do a lot of different things, outside of obviously work, I do martial arts and all those sorts of things. And, Angela's always saying that I do too many things, right? But I enjoy that feeling of being a beginner at something and trying to develop that skill. And I always like to try and actually translate, some of the things that I've learned about how to pick up skills faster into something new. Yeah. So, so I sort of, and I guess, over the years now, like, listening to other podcasts and other people's perspectives on it, yes, you could be a specialist and an expert in one particular field, but I think there's a real market for generalists now. So people who understand a wide array of different things, because then you can actually see things from a different limelight, a different perspective to try and piece it all together and develop an alternative solution, right? So I guess, that's my sort of reflection on it. And I guess, I'm curious, from your perspective as well, did you have a different idea about what law would be like versus what the harsh reality was?
Yes. I mean, again, going back to what I said about when I answered your question about in high school, like, did you know what you wanted to do? We're not exposed to what lawyers do, right? Like, even in undergrad, before you apply to go to law school, we don't know what lawyers do. And it was a completely different picture, right? I thought I'd be helping people more directly, right? Empowering people more directly. But like you said, we're reading and writing for 50 hours a week. We're not talking to anybody. We're not getting to know our clients and what their needs are. We're just going off the law, right? Like this black letter law that's been written in our books for ages, right? Like it's so outdated. It's intentionally inaccessible, right? People need to have a lot of money to assert their legal rights, which that did not sit well with me. That was another factor as to why I left, because I didn't feel like I was making a difference, and I felt like the legal system was set up for lawyers to make money, not to help the needy, right? Not to help people who had legal issues. So yes, it was very different than what I imagined it would be.
When you get into that mindset, it feels very hollow, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why, like, thinking about that word hollow, right? So I went through this period in my career, in the automotive industry where, like, I was like, oh, chasing money, right? I was trying to chase money because, I wanted to pay some bills for my parents and do some things for my family. And so I was all about money. And I got to the point where once I had sort of addressed those problems, then it became really empty for me. And I actually fell out of love with the automotive industry at that point in time. And so, I went through this period where I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to have to, switch it up and change into something else. And then it was only after when I actually took a step backwards in my career, and I still stayed in the automotive industry, but, I went from being a general manager to being a general sales manager, so only having to worry about sales. And I sort of reignited my passion by then focusing on customers and the relationships that I was building with people. And so, so I found that really interesting. And then, now being back into that, dealer principal, general manager type role, my focus had to shift again, because in my capacity now, I can't deal with every single customer that comes into my business. It's not feasible. So instead, I started to focus more on the mentorship and coaching of my staff and developing my people, as opposed. So I'm very invested in my people now, and that's what actually provides me with that sort of self-satisfaction, or that internal satisfaction that was sort of lacking when all I was worried about was chasing ego and chasing money and chasing prestige.
Wow.
So I guess, to digress from that to sort of, I'd like to talk about, your sort of journey away from law and into what you're doing now. How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so like you, I mean, I do a bunch of different things, right? Like I started as a travel writer and travel blogger here in Taiwan. And then I realized, kind of like you, like I like to mentor people. I like to help people. It was actually because of my blog, right, Attorney on a Journey, that lawyers started reaching out to me and just asking me, how did you do it? How did you change careers? How did you pursue your interest, right? And I was like, oh, there's a need for this, right? Like people, we're not taught how to do that, right? We really, like you said, we chase ego and money, and that's what's valuable in society, and that's what we're taught. So so the career and life coaching evolved from that, where I had a social media presence, I had a blog, and people were just asking for my knowledge or just wanted to know my experience and my journey. And so I thought, okay, this is an opportunity for me, and it is a way that I could actually help, not just myself anymore, because the blogging and the travel writing, that's very like, I reap all the rewards, and I determine when and where I work and who I work for. But the coaching is different. It's people, coming out of a place of need, right? Or actually, it's kind of sad. A lot of these lawyers, they call me and they're crying underneath their desks at work because the pressure and the stress is just too much. So that's how it evolved, from the blog with my social media presence to the career and life coaching because of my blog.
Yeah. So the blog, so what I wanted to sort of talk about there. So when you finished your bar, did you start working in law?
Yeah, I did.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So then how did you transition out of that job and then realize that you could make something out of the blog?
Okay. So that's like a two-part journey. The first thing I did was, I was a huge networker, out of law school, and I just started making connections that were law related, but not necessarily, like lawyer jobs, lawyer industries, right? So an opportunity came along essentially when I was practicing law to do the marketing and business development for a legal services company. So it was not, a lawyer job, but it was for services that lawyers would purchase. And so when that opportunity came along, I was just like, yes, I am ready. Like, I don't need to stay here. I don't like this anyway. And it pays more and it's sexier, right? I got to travel all over the country and, take clients to NBA games and dine at Michelin star restaurants. So I was like, oh, hell yes. Like, yes, I will do this over practicing law in an office, right? So that was kind of the first step. And then from there, I just kept exploring other careers, right? Like, made a lot of mistakes, of course, because you're still trying to figure it out, right? When you go from one thing to another, especially when you invested so much time in one thing. But I started changing careers, exploring different industries, and then when I thought I had my dream job, right? I was working in San Francisco. I was in tech. Nobody in San Francisco, nobody goes to the office on Fridays, and when you work in tech, so I thought it was really cool. When I was working that job, my husband's company approached us, not just him, us, and asked us, would we be willing to move to Taiwan for his job? And at first I was like, no way. I worked so hard to get to where I am, like stepping away from law was not easy. But then I thought about it, and again, it's because I don't define myself by a job. I was like, I have nothing to lose, and this is a great opportunity, so let's do it. So that brought me to Taiwan, and that's when I started the blog and the travel writing.
Yeah. And then I guess, speaking about the blog, how when you first started the blog, was it something that it was more personal until sort of, and as you went along, it started to grow, and then that's when you thought, oh, hang on, I can turn this into something else? Or was the idea always to start with trying to do something that, you could share with other people?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was when it started, to be honest. I thought it, for a while I thought, oh, I'm going to be an influencer, right, on Instagram. So I started trying to copy what everybody else was doing, and which never works, by the way, right? You can never, you're always your best being yourself, right? You can never imitate.
Yeah.
That's the hard lesson I had to learn. But I kind of started with that, and then it took a while to actually get the name Attorney on a Journey. And when I did, I didn't even think that much about it. I just was like, oh yeah, I'm a traveler and I blog, and oh yeah, I used to be an attorney. But that was the piece, right? Like, that was the story that everybody was drawn to. It's like, oh, how did you do that, right? Like, I can't believe you quit the law, and like, how did you get to where you are now? So yeah, it's just, life happens like that.
And then, so when you decided that you could, you realized that you could help people from the life coaching aspect, did you then start to foray into, what sort of courses can you do to get better at that? Like, where were you drawing your inspiration from? And I guess, where are you finding your techniques to share with other people?
Yeah, so, I started pursuing a certification, right? That was the first thing I did. I got my certification for life coaching. But what helped me the most was being coached. I hired my own life coach to guide me through the process of, just the experience of being coached, and then she specifically helped me open a coaching business. And so all of that I learned, I kind of carry that into the people that I work with, because I tend to attract the entrepreneurs, right? No surprise there. And so I use what I learned to start my own coaching business and apply it to, all of these lawyers or anybody else who wants to start something of their own.
I always find that that point really interesting, because there's a lot of people that try and do things on the cheap. When I say that, I mean, like, if you want to develop a skill in something, right? Yeah, you can. There's people that can bash at it themselves and have the tenacity and the motivation to just work at it and probably develop something. But then when you do that, you sort of start with and make all the mistakes that you have to make as part of the learning, right? So as an example, I've been trying to work on doing handstands lately, right? And to do a handstand, you need to have like good proprioception in your fingertips and a good sense of balance, and obviously the strength to do it. And when you start going through that process, you sort of realize, oh, yeah, I don't have this, like, the balanced feeling in my hands and my body, and you realize all these things that are sort of disconnected. And I think, when you try and take up any sort of new endeavor, a great way to sort of develop the skill set a lot faster is by, obviously paying somebody for their expertise.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that with anything else that you sort of engaged in life, like, with any of your other interests?
Actually, I mean, yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I'm doing it more and more now, right? It's just this idea of you need to invest in yourself, right? And the investment is it's money, right? And you're paying the expert. And yeah, I'm actually on my second coach now, right? Like, I have a second coach while I'm running my business, because she's coaching me along, because there are roadblocks that I'm going to hit as an entrepreneur and a solo business owner. So I have a second coach now. So I'm continuing to do that. And yeah, a lot of my interests that I have, I probably will hire more experts, right? Like, I do want, like, probably a professional editor to start working on my videos, or I need, like, a professional designer to revamp all my website, my blog, everything, right? And it's funny you bring that up, because lawyers, right, there are a lot of people who need coaching. They don't realize yet, like, just the importance of investing in yourself. If you want change, if you want to be good or successful at something, you have to invest in yourself.
Yeah, there's no shortcut to that development. It's just, you got to put that time in and actually spend the time to work on it, have the motivation to actually stick to it. And I think, when I think back on, so I have, through my work, I have a business coach as well. Her name's Janine, and one of the things that she also does really well is they provide you with accountability.
Yes.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
So a lot of the times, we don't hold ourselves accountable enough, because a day will go past and then we just go, oh, look, yeah, it's all right. I probably don't need to do that today. I'll leave it till tomorrow. And then before you know it, you've left 2 days or 3 days, and then it's like, shit, I really should have done that. Like, I should have done that earlier. And, so one of the things that I'm really big on is I like to look at things as binary. There's only two options. You either elect to do something or you elect not to do something. So when you say no to something, you're basically electing not to do something. And then anytime that you sort of sit on the fence about it, where you go, oh, I'm still thinking about it. If I just take anytime I'm indecisive as a no, then I'm more likely to spur action and just do it. Right. So I guess from that perspective, are there any sort of little, tricks that you use to hold yourself accountable, or to keep you motivated to keep powering along?
That's a great question. Having a coach, like, exactly like you, like, that does keep me accountable. My coach she pushes me to grow my business. So there are certain tasks where I have to do them, right? Well, first of all, I paid for it, right? Like, I'm going to do it. And then second of all, I have a deadline and someone to report to. So there's that part of it. But also, Johnny, I think you probably know, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you can't afford not to do things, right? Because otherwise, like, your business, you're not going to make any money. You're going to fall apart. And for me, it's like, I don't have a safety net. I mean, my husband supports me, of course, but, like, he is not liable for my student loans. I have to pay those back. I have to make a certain amount of money every year. So I think being an entrepreneur who doesn't have, like, a rich parent or a family business, right? I think that's also the accountability, because it's just, I can't afford not to, right? I don't have that option to fail. So
with student loans in America, because your system's a little bit different to ours. Well, I think there's similarities in the sense that it's government funded, right?
Yes, but law school in America is very, very expensive. So when you graduate,
so out of curiosity, what would the total cost of a law degree in America be? Or I guess for where you went to university or college.
By the time you graduate law school, you're looking at $150,000 in debt, $150,000 USD, and our interest, the government interest rates are, what are they now? 6-7%. That's the lowest, right?
That's a lot of debt. Yeah,
it's a lot of debt. It's a lot of money. So yeah, it's I'm accountable because I have to be, right?
You got to fix that debt. So I
Yeah.
guess like to provide you a comparative, right? So for me, doing law and engineering science, I think the total cost of my 2 degrees when I did it was around, I think it would have been around $60,000. So,
Okay.
the larger component, so it would have been like a 40-20 split. I think it was like 40 grand was law and 20 grand was the engineering side of it.
Okay.
And the way that so that's indexed at CPI, so at the inflation rate in Australia. So I guess it's the cheapest loan that you can get or it was the cheapest loan you could get up until we hit record low interest rates in Australia. So but yeah, like I think the point that I wanted to make about having debts is that I think the most dangerous people in the world are the ones that when you've got your back up against the wall, right? So when you've got this hole that's behind you and it needs to be filled, I generally find that that's when people are going to find the most success. So when I think back, in terms of my career, right, like that's why I was so hungry for money. It's because I had to fend for myself, and I didn't have any other time to think about failing or think about other things. And I think, I probably consider failure more now in my life than at any other previous point, just because I probably can afford a little bit more time to think about things and probably impact my own mindset negatively. Whereas when you don't have a choice, you just keep working, right?
Yeah.
So I guess from that, what's the sort of goal for you? Like what are you trying to achieve from all this?
Yeah, first and foremost, pay off my student loans.
Yeah.
Right. That's the first goal. But also, I want to build a lifestyle where I can, make money in my sleep. That's why a lot of what I'm doing now is I'm working on making passive income. Like there's so many ways to automate now, right? Like there's you can learn all of this online, and that's actually what my coach is helping me with now. But making passive income in addition to doing some of the coaching live, maybe in larger groups, right? To kind of accelerate the income. But yeah, it's just to have freedom. Really, is the goal. It's so that I don't have to work for an employer anymore, so that I can support myself doing what I love to do.
Yeah. And so when it comes to, so you mentioned that, so your coach obviously helps you with resources in terms of what, you're sort of looking at from a passive income side of things. Do you take from external influences? So, what are some of the podcasts or books that you like to read and people that you subscribe to that you find out a lot of value to your perspective?
So that's an interesting question, because before I started coaching, I was a total bookworm, like, I'm going to read this book and it's going to teach me how to be a good coach, or I'm going to read this book about how to make money and I'm going to make more money. And what I realized from that is, books are good resources, but they don't make you take action. They don't. So that's why I've always had a coach or somebody there who is, like you said, keeping me accountable, forcing me to take action. And so I mean, nowadays I still I'll read blog posts about specifically from like entrepreneurs about how they do one thing, right? Like how they set up their emails or how they, make passive income. So I look to the internet for, I guess, maybe task-oriented things, but I don't read a ton of books anymore, or I don't listen to that many podcasts. Because I mean, it's great for inspiration, but for me, I'm just such a doer, where it's like, okay, I learn by doing, and that's my model. Like that's how I encourage all of my clients is, it's, you don't get clarity, doesn't come before action. It's the other way around, right? You have to iterate. You have to put things in motion. You have to try and fail, right? That's how entrepreneurs do anyway. It's just you try one thing, you move on. If it doesn't work, you try something else. So I'm just such a big doer, and of course, having a live person behind me is probably where I get the motivation and the expertise.
There's actually a really good, so there's this, they call it the marshmallow. Have you ever heard of the marshmallow challenge? Where they give
with
you
the kids, right?
Yeah. So they give you I can't remember, it's 10 sticks of spaghetti or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And So basically they give you like, so the one that I did was like, they give you like a number of sticks of spaghetti, a marshmallow, so one marshmallow. And then the idea is that you have a time limit that to build the tallest structure that you can, that can stand on its own.
Okay.
And we did it as a when I did it, it was like in a team format. So it's a team building exercise. And, it's funny, straight away you see like different team dynamics where you've got the guys who are like, the engineering minds. Okay, well, let's draw this out, and we need to have lots of triangles in it because triangles form a rigid structure. And then you have like, the guys who just, or people that sit back and just watch and just go, they don't really have an opinion. Then you have the leaders, the ones that start saying, okay, we need to do this and we need to do that, and start directing people in terms of what they sort of think. But one of the funny outcomes of that, in all the sort of marshmallow challenges that they've done throughout the time of since it's been about, was that kids generally build the taller structures, right? And they don't look anything like what we assume they look like. For most adults, we think it's going to look like something like an Eiffel Tower kind of a thing, with a marshmallow, or like one of those sorts of buildings, right? And then but when you look at the kids ones, it's like a lot of the times they just start with the basics. They go, okay, well, they put one marshmallow in the top of one spaghetti stick, and then they go, well, how do I now keep that up? And then they just keep jabbing more spaghetti sticks in to try and keep building, and just they sort of reverse engineer it rather than thinking about how do I build the strongest structure from the ground up. They start with the end of, okay, if I have this spaghetti on this marshmallow on top of this stick, how do I now build the structure around that to sort of just hold it up?
Yeah, right.
So I find that you raise a really interesting point. That you can have all the concepts in the world, but unfortunately, even having an engineering background didn't mean that I did any good in that marshmallow challenge. So yeah. So I guess we've covered quite a lot. From a business perspective, you mentioned previously, you made you made some mistakes, right? And in that transition from obviously going from law into your attorney on a journey, I'm actually just a little bit curious about what some of those mistakes were. Are there any mistakes that sort of stand out for you?
Sure. I mean, just from, even the first job that I took, the sexy job where I was doing everything that I loved, going to NBA games, I wouldn't call what happened there a mistake. I would say it's more of a growth and learning lesson. Just, being in a work environment where you don't speak up for yourself, right? It's so important to speak up for yourself, even if you fear the repercussions. That's something I would have done differently. I might have stayed longer there and enjoyed what I did if I spoke up for myself.
But was that a cultural thing? Like when I say a cultural thing in the business?
Probably, yeah. Because I mean, I would have. You're right. I would have left anyway because of the very toxic environment. But I still, just for my own, my own, I don't know what you want to call it, my own dignity, I probably could have just spoken up a few more times and not cared about the consequences. But anyway, I mean, I left anyway for a reason. And then, the next job I went on to, kind of similar to you, your experience chasing money. The next opportunity, they just sold me on the earning potential, right? It wasn't, it's a sales job essentially. It's very different from what I did before, but, I didn't really think about what it would entail. I didn't think about the pressure or the toll on my body, right? Like I already had gone through the kidney stone scare in law school, and I was still just thinking about money. So I took that job for money, and it turned out to be, just horrible working environment. Not anything remotely related to what I wanted to do. And I actually got fired from that job. I got fired because of my performance. And that was, I think getting fired and being unemployed is actually a very valuable experience though. Like it teaches you a lot. And, again, that's another one of those situations where your back is up against the wall and it's like, okay, I have to do something now, right? Like I have to pay my rent. So that was, in hindsight, that was a good experience too. But just definitely could have avoided that, by thinking before I took the job opportunity, not just wanting to run from something I didn't like. But that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's all part of the journey, right? That's how you learn, right? You learn from your mistakes. You don't, nobody knows exactly what to do before they do something. It's like I said, it's just
Yeah.
the action that leads to clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't really see, and especially if you're, trialing new industries and new work experiences, you don't really know what's a good workplace and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really, I've been fortunate that I haven't really been on the getting fired end, but, I've unfortunately had to fire a few people in my time. And, it's not something that I don't make light of it because, although, sometimes the situations can be quite awkward, and, reflectively, like they can be quite funny. I had to fire a guy once and then, he said to me, "I'm not leaving your office." And I was a bit sort of shocked. Like it was like, after 5 now, and I've had to deliver him the bad news, and it was during his probation, and unfortunately, he just wasn't capable in terms of retaining the product knowledge required, and so I had to let him go, and I felt bad about it because I knew he had a young child, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for a business. I've got to make a business decision as to somebody's capable or not. I think the learning for me from that was to go back and put more emphasis in the hiring policy that I had in place, and to really be more strict about, who were the candidates that I would entertain. But even today, I still make mistakes when it comes to that sort of stuff. Like it's very easy for anyone to make mistakes when it comes to that kind of thing. But, I guess, it was just very awkward because he said to me, I'm not leaving your office. And then I just sort of sat there for a few minutes tidying up my emails, and he still sat there. And so then I was just like, okay, well, if you want to stay there, that's up to you. But I'm going to go home. And I just packed my stuff and I left. And then, like my staff advised me that he left shortly after that. But, like when I think back on some of those things, like that's why culture in a workplace becomes so important, right? And then, I think you as being an entrepreneur, you can sort of develop your own sort of culture that you want. And the thing about culture, though, is that, the more people that you have, the harder it becomes to change. It becomes like this big sort of ship that, you have to put a lot of resources into try and now adjust the direction if you let it barrel out of control. Whereas when a business is smaller, you can very easily make fast decisions and pivot and adjust, the direction that you want to take. So I guess, the reason why I talk about that is because, when you talk about, perhaps getting editors and these sorts of things, like, yeah, it's great, but you got to try and keep your hand on all those reins. And I think for managers, they say that, when you start to have more than 5 direct reports or something, it starts to become unmanageable. So I don't know, it's just something that I was just thinking about when we talk about, that sort of firing and having you back on the wall. I do know for a fact though that guy ended up, getting another job elsewhere, and he's all right. So as much as that was an awkward, moment for me, I also look back on it and think about, those firing decisions as I'm actually giving that person an opportunity to find something better for themselves.
I was gonna say that I was as a coach. That's exactly what I believe. It's you're helping that person because they're not going to do any better in your environment, and they need to learn that lesson, and they need to excel at something else.
Yeah. So I want to ask you this question because this is something that I talk to my staff about, and I'm really curious what you think yours is. Right? I don't know if you've ever thought about this, right? But if you had to boil yourself down to one core value, what do you think your core value is? And I'll give you a moment to think about it, right? I'll tell you what, I'll lead with what mine is, and don't let that influence you at all. But so for me, my core value is transparency, right?
Okay.
So I probably only got to this stage in my life of transparency, probably I would say maybe 5 or 6, maybe 7 years ago now. Because prior to me coming to this value of transparency, my life was very compartmentalized. I had, the version of me that was at work, the version of me that was at home, the version of me that was at martial arts. I had all these different sort of versions of me, and my personality, whilst being coherent across each of them, was still markedly different. And then I had this sort of shift, probably in conjunction with, when I got married to Ange, and, she probably tempered me a little bit. But I started to focus a lot on how do I deliver a message which is true to myself, whilst also, being fair to somebody else. And transparency isn't, the only, it's not, I wouldn't say it's the ultimate core value, because, I've lost friends as a result of transparency. When I've had to deliver a message to my friends to say, hey, well, this is the reason why this has happened. I've had friends who have said, well, they don't like that answer. And, what kind of friend are you? F you, you're not my friend anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lost friends as a result of it. Right. So any core value that you boil, if there's one core value that you boil yourself down to, it's going to have positives and negatives. But I found that from a workplace experience and as a leader in a business, transparency has been probably the most vital value for me in being able to communicate with my people. I think they really understand what's important to me, I guess, from that perspective, because I'm always communicating that very clearly. From your perspective, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but if you had to boil yourself down to one core value, what would you say it was?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like the right word, but it's very similar to your value, but maybe the word is just maybe, I don't know if it's honesty, or it's similar to transparency, like honesty, or hang on, let me think of, it's just the idea of let me think of a better word for this. Authenticity, maybe? Is that the right word? It's just the idea of,
okay.
I mean, I left the law because I mean, that's what I had to do to be true to myself, right? Like, I couldn't sit there in a lawyer's office and bill hours for these rich clients, right, who are wearing Rolexes and suing their sisters over due rent. Like, that was not me. Like, and I can't hide that, basically. I walked away from it because I was like, I can't do that. I can't, that's not who I am. And, even now, like, what I write about for the coaching stuff and what I post about on my Instagram and my social media presence, like, I'm very not just honest, but kind of a little bit harsh about the legal field. And I'll say things like, the legal industry sucks, or like the environments are toxic, and I don't want to sugarcoat, is basically what I'm trying to say. Like, I could never sugarcoat. And that's actually been the key to my brand and my business, because I'm just so honest about. I say it what it is. Yeah, I say how it is.
The word you're looking for is candor.
You think so?
I think so. See, I don't like the word honesty, and I'll tell you the reason why. Because a lot of the times when I do these sessions with my staff and I ask them about their core value, I've had staff say honesty, and honesty is great. Don't get me wrong, great core value. Mm-hmm. The issue that I have with honesty is, from a young age, every child is taught, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it.
But that's not honest to me. I'm like, but I still want to say it. Like, that's the type of person I'm like, yeah, it's not nice, but I still want to say it.
But that's
I'm honest.
That's because that's because your value is candor, right? Like, that's me from the outside looking in, right? So, but a lot of the times, people that say that their trait is honesty, they would struggle to have a blunt conversation, right? Because if they value honesty, but then and the way that I sort of try and word it to my people, to how to think about your core value. If you had to pit two things side by side. So as an example, I really like this one because, people always say, something like, honesty or whatever. And then I say, okay, if you had to choose between being honest and being successful, what would you choose? Because a lot of the time people turn around and go, I don't want to be in the gutter. I'd rather be successful, right? So then, okay, well then honesty is not really your true core value, because your core value should be something that, you can't function without. For me, if I had to live a life or live my life non-transparently, life wouldn't be worth living, right? So that's how I know that that's become my core value, is that, when I pick, transparency against success, well, unfortunately, I'm going to choose transparency, right?
Okay.
If I had to pick transparency over love, unfortunately, I'm going to pick transparency, right? So that's how I sort of then start to whittle it down. I've got guys or people in my team that probably still don't know exactly what their core value is. And I guess the reason why I like thinking about that is because it allows me to communicate with people on a different level.
Right.
When you know what they appreciate and what's important to them, then you can communicate on that level. But if you don't really know them well, it becomes very difficult because what's important to me may not be important to them. So
I like that. No, yeah, I guess maybe candor is the right word. I feel like there might be something stronger, but no, I definitely am very, very candid. If you read any of my writings, I mean, I use profanity. I drop the F-bomb when I talk about lawyers, and I can't. I see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I can't hide it. I'm not going to sugarcoat and put fluff over my experience because I feel like, especially in the legal industry, right? It's not talked about enough. Like, it really isn't. The negative consequences, the severe health side effects that you get from being a lawyer, right? I had a public defender tell me the other day that in his industry, it's very normal to watch his coworkers die early or die young. And I thought, okay, that's really, that's messed up. Like, you guys should not be normalizing that.
Yeah. But it's the system, right? Like, that's what I mean. Like, that's become so ingrained in the culture, the 50, 60 hour weeks, the long nights, that's ingrained in the culture. And unfortunately, there's not, I feel, well, the way I feel about it is in a lot of industries, there's not a lot of strong people who are willing to be different. And so when I think about that in terms of my own career, there was points for me where I wasn't as transparent as I am now. Like, now I'm the eccentric guy with the standing desk. You walk into my office and you're like, where do you sit? And I'm like, I don't. And then, and people look at this guy with a standing desk and they go, are you for real? And then sometimes people look at my shoes and they go, your shoes look weird. And I go, yeah, they're barefoot shoes. Like, they're flat. And I have wide feet.
We wear those too, the barefoot shoes. Yeah. We wear those.
So which ones do you get? The Vibrams or the Vivos, or which ones?
No, neither of those. I don't know. I have to ask my husband. We just got into it, so not the Vibrams, not like it's not like a big brand name, but
okay. Yeah. Well, like, there's a good book on that by Kelly Starrett, I think it is, and it's about sitting and how people spend too much time sitting nowadays.
Yeah.
And so so when I'm at work, I have a standing desk, and sometimes it's a little bit awkward, but I have a table that I do my meetings on. And it's just it's very, very Asian. It's a round table so that everybody's equal.
Okay, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, we've covered heaps, and I know you've got to run soon. So, anything else you want to sort of talk about, or anything you want to ask me?
Sure. I'm just curious, how do you juggle everything that you do, right? All of your other interests with being a dad and supporting a wife who has 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I wouldn't be able to do anything that I do without the support of Ange. She's so good from that perspective. Like, she doesn't like to, she probably doesn't even want me talking about it, but she's really good from that perspective. She provides a lot of support. It's not easy being a mum, and with 3 kids and that have half of my personality, it's definitely not easy. So Cadence, she's 5, and Harley's turns 3 in October, but he's like a 3-year-old wanting to be 5. And then our youngest Eden, who turns 9 months this month, she's already like trying to stand up and get involved with what the older 2 are getting into. So it's going to be chaos. It is chaos. The only thing I can say about that is I try not to fall into the trap of cultural pressure, so peer pressure or work pressure, from the perspective of, I don't feel like if I feel like I don't need to be at work, well, I'm not going to stay at work.
Okay, good.
I'm gonna leave and go and do whatever I need, because at the end of the day, I think everybody's got a limit in terms of what their amount of functional hours is. So being at work for a longer period of time doesn't mean that you're any more productive. I think it's more beneficial to look at your time and go, okay, well, if I need to have a big day, well, I'm going to have that big day. And, so that might mean that one day I'm in the office till late, right? But if I have the momentum that day, I'm going to keep going with that momentum until I can finish everything, and then perhaps the next day is a bit easier and it allows me some more flexibility. I think the other thing that's important is discipline. I think that's not talked about enough to achieve results. So I guess, I do the podcast, I do film studies for martial arts, I do all these other bits and pieces, and they're more passion projects than anything else. Like I don't get paid to do any of this sort of stuff. It's more, I really enjoy it. And then, so how I try and do those sorts of things is I try and set it up so I can, what's the easiest way possible. So, when I do a podcast, literally, like, that's why for the longest time, I haven't really been doing any video, because I just use my Rodecaster. I record the whole conversation. It's put up from start to finish. I don't do any editing apart from to adjust the volumes to make it, a bit louder for people listening. And that's about it. So I try and keep it really, really simple. And even that said, like, Angela's like, sometimes she's like, oh, why do you like take so long to do an Instagram post? And I'm like, because I try and think about what I want to do. That's just the way that I am. I want to have some structure and some thoughts put into it. And she's like, well, are you sure people even care? And then I'm like, well, probably not. But the point is that I care.
You care.
Right. So, yeah. And so, so I guess that's the other thing that I think is important, is having discipline around how you approach those things. So when I do my film studies, like, sometimes I do it all from my phone. So I actually clip up the videos. I do my voiceover all through my phone. She was at me the other day to try and do it on the computer. And I was like, I tried to use iMovie on the computer and I was lost. Like,
that's how I edit all my videos, all my vlogs on my phone too. That's how I do it.
See?
It's just,
yeah, but it's like, it's so much more intuitive, right?
Yeah.
So I felt like when I was doing it on the computer, I was like, I might as well, like, if I'm going to do that, I might as well buy like Final Cut Pro and learn a whole new software, because I feel like I'm learning a whole new language. Like, I've gotten so used to doing these videos in this specific format. I do them for my work. I do them for my film studies. I do them for a whole bunch of different things that, to me, it was just easy to do it that way. And I wanted something portable. So they're the sorts of things. How do I fit everything in? I try to minimize downtime. And when I do have downtime, it's sort of structured. So when I say structured, like, I didn't do anything yesterday, as an example. So Eng and I said, oh, it's our wedding anniversary. So I said, I'm not really going to do anything because I want to spend time with you. So, I try and structure things like that so that when I do have my downtime, I can focus on that to then allow me, to then have the motivation to go back into it and then re-attack it again. And I think the other thing that I have that's sort of inbuilt in my personality is I don't like things hanging over my head. So sometimes I find if I spent too long editing something, I get to that point where I just, I might need to cram one night and just stay up till 2 a.m. to finish it, because I'm just sick of it just sitting there.
Okay.
But aside from that, then yeah, like, the rest of it is just hard work and having a wife who's very accommodating and supportive.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, yeah, like, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. You're my first international guest.
Cool. Oh, awesome. How fun. Yeah.
So,
and I'm sitting in Taiwan, even though I'm from the States.
Obviously, tell people how they find you. So if people want to check you out, Attorney on a Journey.
attorneyonajourney.com. You can follow my Instagram, and my Instagram is actually has become more like my blog, because that's where I'm more candid. And you can see more. You can actually see more of my life there. So yeah, definitely check out the Instagram. But I do have my blog up as well, my travel blog up, and yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Johnny. This was great.
Thanks, Francesca. It was really good to catch up with you.
All right.
All right. We'll have to call it there, and I'll catch you next time.
Okay. Take care, Johnny.
See ya.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.